Okay, welcome back, everybody. Um, I'm here with Kevin Sirachi, and I'm going to let him say a little bit about himself. He's studying with me at the moment, so I'm just going to have him say a couple words and whatever, and then we'll start. He's got an interesting question. I'm trying to do more of these, I said to you, and he brought up something in the studio that I thought would be good for everybody to hear, and something's practical for him. So, Kevin, go for it. Give us somebody. Sorry to put you on the spot like that, but there you are.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Kevin. I've been studying with Paul for 2.5 years now. And one question you always ask is what brought you to the dance? And I would say one thing that has inspired me in art and something that I want to do in the world of painting is sacred art. And fortunately, I found Paul, who is an impressionist painter, but I do think that learning in the impressionist tradition and learning to master the truth of nature is an important part of imaginative painting.
So there you are. I think that's good. That's good information. He also went to college, to college at an elite college just down the road from us. I won't mention what it is. Anyway, Kevin, thank you for being willing to do this. Um, so, Kevin, you just to start this, you were just saying to me, I came in on a critique and I criticized your shape making for the not for the shapes but for the edge sharpness, and you had some questions after that. So you all know, by the way, I may as well say this. You all know the way I lay in a picture, and it's what I teach is we paint in the with the significant emphasis on articulation of the power players, the strong high contrast guys, and so that includes having the edges plus the values. Um, and then you wind up. Hopefully, people can see this a little bit, but you can see what I'm talking about. That's just kind of a start by me. So, Kevin, if you want to take it, and we'll see what we can do with that.
Sure. So you had pointed out in one of the still lifes that I was working on that the edges that I had in it were feeling very cut out. They were very, very sharp.
Yep.
And whereas in nature, it was more of a quiet, soft edge.
Yep.
All the edges were kind of that way, actually. And as I was thinking about it, I was realizing that in the moment that I was working on it, I was not so concerned with the edge quality or the light effect, because at that time in my head, I was just more kind of trying to address the drawing problem that I was working with at the moment. And so it got me kind of thinking about the whole process, the visual order, and how we kind of bring up a painting from empty canvas to the finish. We talk about this thing of all the horses at once, where you try to address all of the different components of a painting at one time. So color, value, light effect, edge, shape, and so forth. And I wanted to kind of, I guess, reconcile that idea with also having to, especially as a student and just trying to understand the game of painting, having to leave all of the horses to go fetch one of the kind of runaway horses and just trying to bring it back to the pack. And so maybe that's enough of a platform to
Right.
bring up a discussion.
So when I came in and did the critique, you were feeling, let's say, you're feeling good about your shapes because you've been working on them, but your edges had been left behind.
Mm-hmm.
That's reasonable,
Yeah.
whether or not you were. Yeah. So I tell you what, one of the things really be aware of is that there is a simpler way to do this. You can draw outlines and noodle them up and trace them on the canvas and fill in the spaces and do all that stuff in a different kind of a linear order. Linear meaning one after the other after the other. One horse, then the next horse, then the next horse. So some people will say, draw the outlines, model it up with grisaille maybe, or some loosey-goosey color to get it form going, and then gradually bring in other things, color. And of course, you can do that, and you can say, so that's a model actually that Gamble taught us. We did that. So, but eventually you wind up with a problem anyway, though, because you got to deal with the back straggler. At some point, it's going to be you may be working on a shape all day long, but it may be the edge quality that's affecting its the vibrancy of that light, and so, but see what I mean? So I don't know what else to say except that what we do when we say do all the horses at once, though, you know that what we mean is, what we say to you is put down the color notes. And the color notes already have three horses, so to speak, three components. They have color, value, and hue. Hue, chroma, and value. So just doing that, and you're scattering them around sort of roughly where they're going to go in the canvas. You've all seen this. And so you can see in that way, though, that we're also doing a one horse at a time initiation. And what I try to do next, and I'm just repeating this for everybody, but you know it, and see where it takes you, though, is that what we do is we go and say, now let's, you start being concerned about placement, but when you do that, you say, oh, okay, so now I'm going to draw. And what we mean when we say draw is we don't mean draw outlines of objects. We mean we're going to draw salient points, like what I was just pointing out in this little drawing here. I was pointing to them and I was showing them this spot here, say that spot there, or whatever, So, so if we're talking about those points, the first thing you do is when you make them with the right edge quality, because the values don't vibrate the same way if the edge is different. A soft edge won't project the same way to your eyes, just by a little bit, and sometimes by quite a little bit. And so a lot of times students think they have a light effect because they made too sharp an edge, and then when they soften it, they realize they don't have the values right. You know what I mean? Because the sharp edge contributed. Anyway, so you do that, and then what happens is you correct the color, and then you move it to the right place, and now we're talking about the spatial. So we're still in color. So you know all that. So break in whenever you're inclined to. But at some point, so you're going to find some of these salient points. You're going to find setup points, and Sargent talks about points and angles. That's a reference we make, useful reference. So. These lights are bright, more so than they used to be. And there's gradually this process of filling in, right, articulating more and more of the things that don't read even, and things that read less well, I should say. And we do work, and when we mean coming out of a fog, we mean we express a whole bunch of stuff lost. That's why we darken our eyes. But you can see that all that's happening, Kevin, is we're getting to a place where all the horses are there also. You know what I mean? It's just a different process. And ours is based on the idea of producing the light effects early and often, and the color, making the color a key player right from the beginning. So from that, go and show me, tell me more about where you're seeing something. Does that get you started about my thinking and that's what I'm trying to project to students and trying to get them to engage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, the more that I'm thinking through this question and talking about it, I think the question keeps sort of abstracting ultimately to just how do I paint? Right. And I think the way to kind of answer that question for myself is just to go work it out on canvas a lot. But I can tell you some more, and I don't know if it's relevant.
Keep going. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. This is your hour, so to speak. We're trying to do 2 of these with Kevin, by the way, maybe about a half hour each. So 2 different subjects, though. So go ahead.
I think something that was also in the back of my head while doing that painting, that still life, I had just read William Morris Hunt, and he really emphasizes simplifying.
Yes.
And I found it. We had previously done a portrait on brown paper with just black and white charcoal. And I found his advice very, very effective in getting me to a place proportionally where I was satisfied with in that brown paper drawing. Mm-hmm. And the way I did that was to simplify it visually into just the light and the dark mass, and to see those shapes together and as a whole. Mm-hmm. And so while I was doing that, I really wasn't too concerned with edge quality and light effect, because I was just looking at those two masses. And so that's just some more, I don't know if you can look at it the same way in painting, or if it was, if I should have been more attentive to those light effects and stuff.
Well, the thing is, there's you got to do what you got to do thing for sure in painting. And so much of what we're talking about is where you're coming from. I find that some students catch on to values early, and some people catch on to shape. Some people think it's all about light and never even bother getting the shapes right. Yeah, I mean, it's like funny stuff, but we all come from different places, and there are reasons to use, to do one or the other. If you're doing that quickly enough, and then so when your drawing actually starts happening, that is to say, in the sense of being specific, I don't know of any reason why you wouldn't start incorporating edge. But I'm not a big fan of just blobby whatever. But if you do it quickly enough, I couldn't care less. Do you see what I mean? And how is that any worse in one sense from color? Color is just nothing but worse blobs. They're just. I try to get you to feather the edges so there's absolutely no mark making that would draw attention to itself. So how is that really in one sense any different? So I wouldn't chase you away from that. The better part of what you're talking about is what we had in our video a few weeks ago, talking about the flat masses. That principle is the same. I showed the picture of Benson, the woman in white sitting in front of some trees in the distance. That was just a lay-in. You could see there were like 4 masses. So if that's what you were thinking, why not? Yeah. And in color, it just happens that they're color masses, but your first job in color is the values. So, but that would, again, my thinking with students is explore whatever you can explore. I'm not an academic who says we're going to do the outline, guys. I'm saying we have these elements and introduce them. If you're following my thinking, at some point you'll introduce them. You'll say, so they're all on the page, but why should I be in a big hurry if that's what you're thinking? Mm-hmm. But that's what I really want to emphasize with people. What gets you there quickest is, that's best practices. So if one of the things that happened when I was a student with Gamel, we didn't do that without very careful shape making, but we did isolate major masses. There's no question we were just making big flat shapes. Mm-hmm. By the way, Tom Dunley in our video, probably right before this, you've probably seen it by now, does refer to Gamel's references to that book. And he was specifically talking about, what was he talking about now? I think I've forgotten. So, but for whatever it's worth, it's, but his point was about Gamel was that he said it was his go-to book in some way. And it could be that it's just part of the whole Boston mythology, and he's from this area. Mm-hmm. So, but who knows? But that's the thing is that's one of the majors is to isolate the groups that are major. Even this thing here, and I'll try to do this, but you'd see this isn't a busy little thing. It's hardly got anything to it. I do try to make reference to a point that I can use for point measuring, sort of a geometry thing. But you can see there's a series of major. This is like a big orange, but it was full of all sorts of patterns and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? Or this thing here. All that had these things all have bunches of drawing. Even this thing was more broadly the chest area that has a bunch of folds and stuff in it. It was much more broadly laid in than that. Mm-hmm. So, but the one thing I do though is when I do it, I actually want to know right now. So I just tell you, which you've already heard, but that I want that edge to snap and pop the light because I'm trying. Remember the start of a painting rather, and start of a drawing the way in the mass drawing type too, is to assess the range we're going to work in, and without actually using edges, how can you? You can choose one, and that's one of the things I didn't like about Hunt. He makes it sound like it's arbitrary. I mean, in the extreme. Mm. And I don't find it's arbitrary. If you're going for broke, if you want the best, you do some exploring first. You don't just buy into something you just happen to pass through your head or something you did last week in a different picture. So that's my thinking about this is exploratory. And we're exploring the range of color, range of chroma, range of, everything. Mm-hmm. So, and the values certainly are one of them. But when we're talking about, in your Boston School thinking, when a dark meets a light and has its edge, then you can start talking about its light effect and how it relates to other dark meets light and have their edge, which may or may not be different. Mm-hmm. And then what they do in relation to your eye. So, but that's there's no critique I would make of what you just described. Simplifying is majorly good. Yeah. Does that get us closer to that?
Sure.
For people? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think this simplifying versus falsifying is also
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
a question that needs to be worked out. Maybe, like for each of us individually, maybe.
So what is falsifying? I mean, if you want to point it at this, or maybe that bigger picture might be better for people, but is there something where you would say that's falsified? And I'm not trying, I'm not having you pick on me, but
No.
Pick on
Can I
me.
give an example from another painting?
Yeah,
that I had?
yeah,
because
yeah.
I was working on that the portrait that I'm working on,
Right.
and you pointed out that the shadow line that I had in it was too generalized, you might say.
Okay. And so that's false? I'm jumping ahead of you.
Yeah, I would say that as far as I understand it right now, maybe that would fall under the category of false, because you said like don't be sort of wishy-washy, something like that. You know, be direct. Or clear maybe is a better
About
word.
the line of shadow?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
maybe it was just the right time in that painting to finally kind of
Right.
articulate that shadow line better.
Yeah.
But
Well, if you think falsifying is when I say paint the head as an egg, then you'd be right. And I do. I tell people actually when you do a lay-in like this, an area is flat, paint it flat. If it's got a round, I'm talking about just blobs of color, just roll them a little bit. I mean, let's get the idea of color movement into a mass, as a part of the conversation. Sorry, I got lost off your track a little bit. What was that last portion of that?
I guess maybe the last part of what I was thinking there at the end was it was the shadow line was kind of generalized because
Right, there you go. Yeah.
Do you have it now?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
So what one can do, and this is the speed thing. How long are you going to leave it like that? If you go around generalizing everything in a picture, you're not going any place. It's the name small, miss small thing. You know what I mean? But you can take that to extreme. So when I say the head's an egg, the first thing I want to do at some point along the way is find some salient points on that thing to turn it out of an egg. I want to articulate the structure of the reading side, and then it'll be an egg with specifics on it. But that's still in the model of, relatively generic. But in other words, it's on the eyes are left, noses are left out, whatever. So in a version of the, so is that false? If that's what you mean by false, it's a good word. But I don't like it in the sense of I'm not trying to do it to make it look like or to pretend I think it looks like this. The one thing I do though, when you do a generalization, an egg for a head, is I expect it to have the tilt and the proportions of the egg you're looking at and the color. So I'm already getting you to do more than you may want to do. And again, you got to remember to take what you can get for where you are, And none of us, I don't think it's smart for any of us to think we're geniuses. I think it's really far better to one stick at a time, break the bundle one stick at a time. Don't try to do three things at once, the Bobby Jones quote, So if you know that, then you know that I'm really not pushing something where I think you're going to be able to do this. It's every one of these items is one at a time. But you know that too, right? So I've just found that it works really nicely if you just say the name of whatever the heck it is you're about to do, So you're gonna make the size. You're gonna correct the size problem, and at that point, if it's got a good edge on it, then at least do it that well. I am one of these guys, by the way, Kevin. So for whatever it's worth, to say what if I'm correcting a shape, and I can at the last minute just say, and what was that edge again? I'll do that. But that doesn't mean adding a lot, and that means I'm not. It still doesn't mean I'm actually determined to get it. I'm just trying to not start falling behind by saying something that just isn't useful. So when I see somebody paint a soft edge where there's a hard one, I think that's falsifying. So with myself, I just stay away from edges because I hate that. I just stay away from them. Leave white canvas. I much prefer that to false statements. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
That's the way I use the word, though. But I'm thinking the way you're using it is more the way I would use the word generalize.
Yeah.
And I believe solidly in generalizing.
Yeah.
I believe that, for example, an arm is a tapered tube. And if you can at least do that, you're going to see how it's different from a tapered tube. If you can draw the arm with a shadow line on it at the right place, you'll see that, it isn't a straight line. It's got a bump right there. And a huge part of what we do, it's like trial and error. You put out something and you realize how to correct it. So it's all the adjustment thing. So in that sense, I know it's not a tube. But if you don't hang around, though, and you do that all over the place, and you make this stupid tube figure, you know. And I don't have any problem with guys do that on their computers or, you know, if they're making illustrations and they want us, and that's a good sketch model for them. I don't care about any. That's a different animal.
Yeah.
Than the impressionist one. Are we getting closer to covering all your points? You had no trouble remembering all that. You seemed a little worried about it.
Well, there's a lot to it, I think.
There's a lot to it, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe could I ask you a question on this?
Yeah.
You talked about, I'll try to point this to the camera.
Yeah, point it so it doesn't have glare, though. Just notice the glare in that image over there.
Okay.
Turn it a little bit. I think you might be okay. Maybe just tilt it down a little bit. It's probably the light picking up. Let's see if I can do this. I think you're okay, just right there. Just whatever you got. And I'll watch in here. You point out. You point to it. Well,
yeah. See
for them.
Okay. Okay. So earlier you talked about painting this area broadly at the beginning.
Yeah.
And that would be because essentially it's the same value as the background, and so it's reasonable to unify that at the start.
You're talking about the green and the orange in the background.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Now I didn't unify it in color. I never do that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I guess just value.
But I'll make it one value, and if it's plainly not one value, I might. Who knows? But I try not to make statements like that. But I also try not to get into second level contrast. I want high contrast stuff really. Uh-huh. So if I can blur my eyes and make it go away, I try to avoid those things though. So I could make it out of two values instead. But anyway, go ahead. What you're saying? Yeah.
And maybe to clarify, when you said you paint broadly, did you mean that you didn't articulate the edge at the beginning? It was. Oh.
No, I did that. I do exactly what we do here. I find something that reads, and I find something else that reads. This is in the classic of Degas. Anybody who's going to draw a line with that much authority has to know where he's starting and where he's going to end. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm trying to do is just set up points so I can shoot a big line, if you want to put it that way. Does that get us closer to what I'm to? So broad. I don't just shoot some dumb line. I think I ever do that. And yet I just said I do that with form up to a point. Well, I can make the head an egg, but I still try to make it her egg or your egg. You know? So, and then I don't leave it there. You know, I immediately bring enough data to it. I might get around. I should say that carefully, but get around. But I try to, no matter what I do in any area, I try to say something that's got a hunk of reality stuck to it. Mm-hmm. So if it was just this my hand here, I would probably try to articulate this line right through here. Can you see it on the screen there? Yeah. But I would try to articulate that just as it's got a good point in it, right? So it's got a good spot. I can do that much, and then down below there, I might generalize about that for a while. Just throw some red. Mm-hmm. Do you see what I'm doing? And if you look at the picture of the movie, we have a monitor here, a dinky one. But you can see how that could be generalized. That is a true generalization.
Yes. And
if you want to call it false, but I'd use that word around me. That would trigger the wrong reaction.
Yes.
So areas
in this area here.
Yeah.
Where the green meets the orange.
Yep.
Was this the first mark you made to make that line?
No,
was it more blended?
It was vague. Yeah.
Okay.
It was vague. Yeah.
So I guess that's my next question, which is if you left this where this green meets the orange vague at the beginning while you were going after the majors at the start, then one question I would be asking myself if I were doing this painting in the process is like, when do I need the shape of this bowl or whatever that is in the green thing in the background to relate that to the other shapes to just to get the right shapes and drawing of the thing. Yeah.
Well, it's a thing where the earlier the better with everything. If you could have everything on the board right now, wouldn't that be nice? But have it on there with crap is not a good plan. So we're actually doing this in very good time. So we get another good 5 minutes or so. You're probably watching that for me. No, so let me see if I can do this. Too bad this is so dinky. I don't know what I had in my head. I could have showed it on the screen even. We could point an arrow at it. But you see, this is the drawing I'm after. And its length and its tilt and this then, set up some widths, some very significant widths. And then I'm setting up exits, these various things. and I'm keeping my eyes blurred. So the color in here is just there because I don't want to look. I want the color scheme to look like it's all there, and I want to be able to judge of it quickly. But I might work just this edge and feather this away with white out here. So it would be a very modest question. But the specific answer is when all the strong guys are doing well in relation to each other. That's when I start worrying about what I'd call subplot or other aspects of the drawing. How this arc here might relate to some other, including some major things. How it might participate in a bigger, longer line. I think I'm getting glare on this thing. I'm sorry, guys. That wasn't too cool. All right. So I'm talking about getting this mass here. Even though it's three colors, I'd probably just have that value, probably have a color movement in it. But you can see I'm not going to be dividing it because I'm trying to get this edge right here.
Mm-hmm.
And now what I was saying to Kevin is if you blur down a little bit, you'll see that it's important for me to get this as a low spot. This and some of this stuff is a high spot, some left, some right. And the placement on the page can be had with most of that stuff. And the general proportions and gesture. And then there'll be a question of a few exits. Is that getting close to what you're wondering? If you want to grab this, and I just find that if you tilt it back, it gets glary.
Yeah, I think it's all really fruitful discussion, and I think part of me thinks too, like as I'm setting up the major light effects and I'm relating them and I'm at a point where like I don't know if they're quite right to one another.
Right.
Maybe I need more information to verify that. And right now I'm just speaking about the drawing problem.
Okay.
The shape relationships and
sure.
And maybe at that point I would say like there's this bowl in the background which you don't really see if you blur your eyes, but maybe I need that shape to kind of verify the other shapes.
Yeah, I never have a rule about that's the visual order thing is, blur your eyes and draw the strong guys, but I couldn't care less about adding something. Like sometimes the top and bottom, like I need to know, like she's almost touching the top of this thing. And if the frame hits it, it's going to cut her off rather poorly, badly. I don't remember why I did this. I do try to avoid those things, but you might want to set that up so that it's going to be the right distance from the frame. But then immediately you'd go to the light spot, put that in the right place, and use that from that point forward as your leading bit of drawing. The one thing to keep remembering is if you think of drawing objects, this isn't logical. You can't just be drawing abstractions. So when I talk about the width of this thing, these two lights here and this thing down here, maybe to that, it's sort of a cross shape here with a tilt to it. That's the classic of the ovoid model that Amy Moore talks about. That's our game. And I find, though, that if you articulate this with great beauty, match it in the sense of bringing what it's got for you. Remember, you're already discovering what the value ranges you're going to be able to work in, the chromal range and stuff like that. So it's all good. So you bring that with great quality. By the time you get this, and a couple of these, you can see your entire painting. If you've already got color blobs just sort of floating around in there. And that's the thing that I want people to get to be trusting in, that drawing. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because it contains so much. But if you don't articulate that beautifully like itself, it just doesn't do this thing of, this is what's so beautiful about coming out of the fog. It actually implies the real things are in the fog. Now, the one thing some people think coming out of the fog means is making it soggy. You know what I mean? But I don't take it that way. I take it just to mean literally paint those guys first, who are first, and draw them the way they always draw things the way they look. Mm-hmm. Now, having said all these things about falsifying, but I try to avoid putting things in there wrong, in a way that where the appearances aren't there. And I do try to avoid it up to a point. I put colors down, and sometimes they do. Well, that background finally, if this is a start, this background has got to be covered. And you don't have time to do this or to do it particularly well. So to do this rather poorly isn't a big issue. But if you bring it in here early and you put hours and hours into this and you haven't got the strong stuff in here, you would have done better to generalize. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was there anything else? Does that cover it, do you think, for now?
Well, I think that does nicely to kind of wrap us up, actually, because that addresses the original concern I brought about the cutout edges. Because something in my mind right now, based on what you said, is that instead of neglecting the edge quality of those edges, why not bring in the fullness of the truth of that edge quality to help me see the drawing of it?
Kevin, the thing about my evolution was I would sit there in a charcoal drawing and see, finally, after 2 weeks of drawing, I'd finally see how stupidly wrong my proportions were. And I thought, what's that all about? Well, I had more data. The thing looked more like. Now you can see how it ain't like. So I just started turning it into a formula, as it were. You know what I mean? And let's say, why don't we always paint what we can like? And this happened, and first thing I know, I'm looking up and I'm seeing Boston School. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, because that's what it looks like, and then you'll find their starts, and it's very evident that they're doing the same thing. Mm-hmm. So that's where it came from. But it doesn't mean, though, see, you have in your development as a painter, everybody's got these big worries about shape making. Well, you should. And you should, if you have a shape problem, it's nothing stopping you from using the points looking like, as long as you don't get lost in making them look like in the wrong, indefinitely. But make it look so one of the things that happens in our way of working is we make them as tolerably like as we can, which gets us to the next video. You make them as like as you can, but it's in enough superficial way you can get out and get on to the next point. So these guys wouldn't have been been adequately articulated, these high contrast points. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And what that is kind of like the key to a lot of this, And that's where it begins to be more like what Gamble said, kind of a sketch model. One layer, but if you blur your eyes, if you just see the thing in a quick, generalized way, you can throw a lot of stuff together and say it looks sort of like this. Well, our sketch model just is the one, the blurred eye one. It just says we're drawing the power guys and we're ignoring all the rest because those are the salient things. Mm-hmm. It's a version of a sketch model. So, okay?
Great.
All right.
Great,
good.
Yeah.
Good. Well, the next question is going to be just as much fun. By the way, Linda Jen, thank you very much for that nice donation. I was supposed to say something at the beginning, but thank you very much again. Yeah, you guys, they keep coming. I really do appreciate it. And Mr. Producer is still kicking, still working for us. So I guess it's a good thing. All right, so please keep sharing, liking, and all the rest of that stuff. Our numbers are going up. One of these days, I am planning to do a couple more videos with Tom Dunley. And so if you have any questions, having watched the first ones, please put them in the comments or email them to me. You'll see what it's all about. I mean, we're talking about Gamble's approach to teaching, things he said, what he did with us. And that. I'm trying to lean on that for a bit. So if you see anything, say something. That's an inappropriate phrase. All right. Next time, see you guys. Thank you very much, Kevin. I do appreciate that.
Thank you, Paul.
Not that you're going very far.